Resilience is the ability to persist over time.
In the Manila Bay and other bays that experience red tides, it is the marginalized that is affected in health and in economy.
The engineering is the ability to absorb, thrive, and then recover. The faster you're able to recover, the more resilient.
Sa Pilipino, ito ay katibayan at katatagan sa mahirap na sitwasyon at ang kakayahang bumangon muli.
Yung ecological naman, the ability to adapt. Yung evolutionary resilience, vale, to really innovate and be creative.
Resilience is really being able to spring back from adversity, but it should have learning, and therefore it strengthens you to be more resilient than before the adversity came to you.
Before COVID-19, the Philippines was already on to SMT-based measures to improve its resilience capacity. COVID, the country was awakened to the need for resilience of our economic, health, and educational status as well.
The country as a whole is, I think, not so resilient because while we have the capabilities, the opportunities, and the resources to cope with COVID-19, the whole body is suffering because the leadership and management is not working so well. When it comes to individual resilience, those who have more resources, capabilities, and opportunities will be more resilient than those who are not.
A lot of the problems really may be interconnected, vale. You have to look at it from a holistic point of view. It encompasses more than natural sciences or physical problem, vale, but also it gets into the ecological, biological, as well as social pa nga.
Among issues and problems we have are poverty, ecosystem destruction, climate change, and variability.
Much of our attention is placed only after the disasters happen. What we should do really is to take early action years before the hazard strikes, and we should put our attention and our resources into that type of planning.
We need SMT-based transdisciplinary and inclusive approach to coping with possible hazards.
The fragmentation of society needs to be resolved for resilience.
Communication is very, very important, and we should communicate to the people using not just scientific communication means, but through arts, music, understand the mindset of the Filipino people so we can communicate better.
Well, the way to move forward is interoperability.
So we have to do a lot of work as a person, as a community, and as an institution to really have resilience as one of the values of the Filipinos. Yung tunay na resilience na towards improvement.
Building resilience requires sustainability science inspired by transdisciplinary approach.
To be sustainable, you have to be resilient. To be resilient, you have to be sustainable.
Go natural, go with nature's flow. Non-structural or natural interventions, as well as good planning, is the most sustainable.
Finally, we need to harness and strengthen the Filipino spirit of bayanihan.
Pero dahil kami ay nasa academic,
Kailangan
pinag-aaralan
natin
namin
matingnan
yung
kung
mga
ano talaga ang kailangan natin not only for ourselves, but for a people as a whole.
Resilience ng mga Pilipino towards the collective effort among communities
not to blame anybody.
and the strengthening of
Resilience Live.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 14th session of the Resilience Live webinar. My name is Audrey, and I will be your host for today. The Resilience Live webinar series is brought to you by the UP NOAA Center and the UP Resilience Institute in partnership with UNESCO International Geoscience Program, or IGCP. Our partners for this episode include the Lyceum of the Philippines, Laguna Biology Society, the UP Los Baños Interdisciplinary Studies Center for Integrated Natural Resources and Environment Management, the Association of Filipino Forestry Students, UPLB, the UP Volcano Tectonics Laboratory, the Mapua Malayan Colleges Laguna, the UP Rockhounds, the Geological Organization of Partido State University, the Association of Geologists and Geological Engineers of Mapua, the Mindoro State University, College of Arts and Sciences, Yaman, Philippines, the Center for Neighborhood Studies, Philippines, the Philippine Association of Geology Students, Society of Economic Geologists, Student Chapter, the Municipal Government of Rizal, Laguna, the Earth Island Institute, Asia Pacific, the United Architects of the Philippines, the Geological Society of the Philippines, the Association of Geodetic Engineering Students of Bulacan Agricultural State College, the Geodetic Engineers of the Philippines Incorporated, Bicol University Student Chapter, the Geodetic Engineers of the Philippines Incorporated, Naga College Foundation Student Chapter, the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and the Junior Academic Research Enthusiast Society of Bulacan State University. With that, our speaker for today is the Wilson Chair of Hazard and Risk and the Director of the Institute of Hazard, Risk and Resilience, or IHRR, of Durham University. He has been the President of Natural Hazards Division of the European Geosciences Union, or EGU, and the Program Committee Chair for EGU Series on New Dimensions for Natural Hazards in Asia. He also served as an executive editor of Natural Hazards and Earth System Sciences, and his focus spans on multi-hazard interrelationships to single hazard research in landslides, earthquakes, flood, and wildfires. In his research, he focuses on anthropogenic processes, invasive species, time series analysis, mathematical models, visualization, complexity, confronting models with data, and communicating science. Here to talk about communicating resilience, visualization, virtual or augmented reality, serious games, and AI, I am handing off the spotlight to Dr. Bruce Malamud for his presentation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And also, good afternoon to everyone in the Philippines, Magandang hapon po. And it was just recently, I was there a few weeks ago. I'm very sorry to hear about the severe tropical storm, Kristen, and all of the impact it's had. And I know that you have a new tropical storm coming now. I'm going to spend about the next 30 minutes talking about communicating resilience, visualization, augmented reality. So I'm just going to share a screen now. And if the host would just let me know if the screen is being shared okay, that would be lovely.
Sir, Dr. Bruce, the screen, your presentation is sharing right now.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do today is I'm first of all going to give a very brief introduction to the Institute of Hazard, Risk and Resilience at Durham University. Then I'm going to talk about the role of communications and resilience, just a couple slides, visualization, serious games, virtual augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and communicating uncertainty. And the idea here is that I want to have something that we can then provoke a little bit of discussion with. So I'll just start in here. So the Institute of Hazard, Risk and Resilience at Durham University, we're one of 10 research institutes that cut across the 26 Durham University departments, and we take an interdisciplinary approach to understanding hazard, risk, and resilience. We're not dissimilar to UPRI, although we have a much smaller group, and that was one of the reasons I spent a few weeks there, was to talk about the activities that you were doing there. We have a lot of activities on our webpage, so do visit us. So I'll just go straight into communications, and we've already seen in the introduction, there are many ways to define resilience. I'll be taking resilience as the UNDRR definition, how we resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt to, transform, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner. I've generated a number of images here. I've used ChatGPT and I've tried to indicate where I have done that. So what's the role of communications in resilience? First of all, communications is one of the pillars of resilience building. And we heard this a number of times in the introduction to this Resilience Live Series 14 for today. And so examples where communication plays a key role, first of all, anticipation and resistance, early warning systems and preparedness, such as flood alerts and evacuation plans, adaptation, sharing knowledge and best practice for adapting to the hazards, such as community education and climate resilience, transformation, facilitating collective understanding and policy changes. This might be sustainable urban planning, recovery, coordinating effective relief and rebuilding strategies, such as transparent disaster relief efforts. And finally, I add this final one because I think it's key to many aspects of resilience is uncertainty. And this is ensuring that people understand the limitations and uncertainty in risk assessments. So I'm going to go into visualization for communicating resilience. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I did a 2-hour workshop when I was in the Philippines, and this is from the 20th of September. You are welcome to download these slides, and they're quite a much more extensive discussion of different ways we can visualize quantitative and qualitative data. I'm just going to give you a bit of a taster here. So hazard maps is one way, and we can think about the color we use and whether there's transparency and the shapes we use. And all of these will play into the impact and the people that we are trying to deliver our message to. These are a couple that came out recently with Tropical Storm Kristen. And you can see here that it's very immediately apparent to the public that this is where it's at and this is where it might be going. And this is the cone of where we're not sure. And it took us many years before we really got to a good way of visualizing how tropical storms progress over time for the public. This is more with words, and it's another example of expanding out. Here is where it's at, and we're expanding out. And a lot of work has been done with psychologists, experts, and the public to think about how we present these sorts of visualizations to the public. Now, there's many more quantitative data visualizations we could give. I've given a number of URLs that you can go to where I think some of the best work is being done in visualizing data. Now, we can also visualize semi-qualitative, and so this would be just using words. And so we have our numbers here: 15 meters, first alarm, Marquina River level, or the emergency alert extreme, where we start using words here. We can use infographics to start presenting ideas. This was actually done by an undergraduate as part of a module that I taught when I was at King's College London. And you can see asked them to talk about exposure, vulnerability, and the hazard itself. We can use quotes with words. And so here's geophysical, hydrological, atmospheric, marine. These are a bunch of different hazards that appear in different people that are talking about quotes, and then we can add quotes to it. Or if we have the ethics permission, we can start adding the pictures on it to create a bit more impactful. Now, if we go into qualitative data examples, these are social vulnerability maps. And so we start representing qualities of the information, or qualities, in this case, vulnerability, very low to very high vulnerability with different colors. And this is social vulnerability to natural hazards in the Philippines. These are social networks maps. So this was a paper that I was involved with. We actually did this in the Philippines, in South Africa, and in Nairobi. And here we're giving two examples, which is social network maps in Nairobi and Cape Town. And this is a representation of items and actors that don't have a physical spatial representation, but they are somewhere and they act with the actors themselves. And so this is an example here, is there might be an NGO that is international. It's no real fixed location, but then it is acting on individual houses within the community. And so people see it, and we call these qualitative GIS representations of resilience. We can use photographs. So this is an example of photographs. This is work being done by Neil Denton, who's a professor in practice at the Institute of Hazard Risk and Resilience here at Durham University, and Damien Wooten. And they took a whole series of pictures, which is representing different aspects of resilience. And that, the picture paired with the text, becomes quite a powerful way of communicating resilience. Now, some of the challenges we have for visualization for communicating resilience is to avoid oversimplification or misrepresentation, and ensuring clarity without reducing the complexity of resilience dynamics. So there are many challenges that we can think about for visualizing. Now I'm going to move along to serious games for resilience learning. And serious games is something that I started to work in, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago, and is something I've always had a strong interest in. So first of all, serious games are serious or applied games that are designed for the primary purpose other than pure entertainment. It can be physical, tangible, or a virtual simulation of real world designed to educate, inform, and train players. And these are just a few examples in the hazard community. And they might be board games, they might be online, they might be role play, they might be quizzes. But its purpose is other than pure entertainment. And the role in resilience is helping participants engage with decision-making scenarios in risk management and resilience planning. It's encouraging collaborative learning and problem solving under simulated prevention or crisis conditions. And also it can allow the observer or the facilitator, this might be a social scientist, to observe participants as they discuss, play, or make decisions. It's a different methodology than workshops or interviews and can often give a very rich understanding of sometimes of a situation where the players do not feel that they are being talked at or asked questions, but they're talking amongst themselves. So the serious games can raise awareness. They can be involved with DRR strategies, education, and communication. So who are the serious games for? They can be for community, and community can mean many, many things. It can be for a local community. It could be for a community of scientists. It could be for a community of policymakers. So I've added some of these here: students and teachers, scientists, risk managers, policymakers. I'll just give you a couple of examples of reviews. There's a good review paper in 2008 on serious games for DRM, and this is very good. We then, because of my interest in it, a PhD student that I was working with, she's now working for Gallagher RE. This is Shreyasi Chowdhury. And then Amy Donovan, who's at Cambridge, was a co-supervisor with myself. And Shri did a critical review of 44 serious games to do with hazards. And what she did is she started breaking these up into whether they address hazard, vulnerability, exposure, or uncertainty. And in fact, very few of them really addressed uncertainty to a strong amount. Many of them address hazard, some of them vulnerability, and many of them exposure. And so she put together suggestions and gaps in game designing, gaming sequence. And from this, we designed what we're calling the landslide serious game. And so just to give you, I'll come back to that in a little bit, the landslide serious games, but I'm just going to give you some examples of serious games. And so some of these might be simulating resource management in disaster scenarios, others in urban resilience and planning simulations. So one example is the UN ISDR Stop Disasters. And this is a fun one. You can play it individually. You can play it with groups. So you start a disaster. You look at the cost of the damages, the people injured. And so you run scenarios. This would be an example for a tsunami. This is the serious game one that Shri did. And we put together a board here. And this was designed for the northeast of India. And so we made it particular to that region, but it could be made for many different regions. And we can start seeing there's a river here, there are roads here, there's various schools, and there's trees, and a little town here, and then mountains. And we designed a whole series of cards and a lot of discussions on these, where we had mitigating actions that could be done. And we had a professional artist do all of this, and a different professional artist did this one. And then we talked about the action that could be done and the result. And basically what happens is people roll a die, and through it, either a landslide might occur, or they are able to, in groups, decide on mitigating actions that they can take. And so it's a game that will take maybe a half hour for people to be discussing the different ways of mitigating against landslides and gaining points or losing points. So what are some of the challenges with serious games? Design and engagement. So how do we design the games to be accessible to diverse groups? How do we avoid biases in how we design the games? And then what's success? And I think this is the case in anything that we do for communicating resilience, is how do we ensure the learning outcomes translate into real world learning and resilience? What I've seen is that there's many methodologies and ways for communicating resilience. Some of them are very innovative, but they're innovative, they feel good, they're exciting, but are people getting something more out of it? And so there are methodologies in the social sciences to measure just before the communications happens, just after, and then going back 3 months after, if there's actual education, communications, learning that is intended to measure the success of whether the outcomes are translating into real world learning and resilience. So I'm going to go into virtual augmented reality next in resilience. And just in the lower right here is an earthquake VR simulation. Sorry, not earthquake. This is surviving a tornado in virtual reality in 360 degrees. So what is virtual augmented reality? It's a computer-generated simulation of a three-dimensional image or environment, and it can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way by a person using special electronic equipment, such as a helmet with a screen inside or gloves fitted with sensors. And I just last night was looking at Google, and there's a lot now, particularly in the last couple of years, on virtual reality. So one can find a lot, particularly now starting to think about the hazard community. Headsets can be completely wireless. This is a MetaQuest 3. This is myself actually prepping a VR headset at a UK Alliance for Disaster Resilience Research conference so that I can show it to a social scientist. And what's the role in resilience? So first of all, the immersive experience allows users to explore hazard scenarios or resilience strategies in virtual environments. It's very immersive. And until you've actually been in virtual reality, you don't realize how immersive it is and how much more you are taking on about the physical or the synthetic animated environment that you're in. So it can enhance the understanding of the physical environment and risk scenarios through immersion. It can facilitate community engagement because you can have multiple people sharing the same space, but those people might be in different countries, different buildings, and they can be doing participatory planning and resilience building, particularly for people in different physical locations. So an example would be a virtual reality or VR simulation of flood events or earthquake impacts used for public education and planning. Now, some methodologies of using VR, AR, visualizing data information in 3D related to hazard, risk, and resilience, modeling. So here are a 3D point cloud to the right, but we can also visualize different aspects of risk in given locations. The hazard, what can one visually see as many hazards are hidden? The exposure, so this could be the roads, the buildings, or other human assets, but more importantly, the vulnerability. What can we start seeing about the characteristics of the people or the communities or the infrastructure, which increases the susceptibility to the impact of the hazards? There's other risk-related items that we might try to visualize, the coping capacity or the impacts of the hazards. So we can create our own 360-degree content for others to see. Photos of a place, we can upload those to Google Street View. We can create videos, create virtual tours of these. We can create models, various hosting platforms, but more complex for the user. I already mentioned the shared spaces and connections where two or more people from different locations can view and discuss the assets together. So for instance, we might have 3 or 4 resilience institutes or geological surveys meeting and discussing a given region and leading a virtual tour. We can also create standalone apps for education or discussion and simulation. So this is an example of using VR, AR. This is a virtual reality simulation of a real landslide for education and training. This was in Malawi, where they've created different simulations for policymakers, students, and communities to go in where they can add more trees, take away trees, and then they can do synthetic landslides and show what it looked like. This here is an earthquake simulator in VR, and they have the person go in. There's different things that can happen, and you can watch as you're going in, and it's basically trying to emphasize the drop, cover, hold on aspects of an earthquake. Wonder is an app that is in the Quest, the Meta store, and it uses Google Street View photos and user uploaded images. It's an excellent view of urban and rural areas, and it allows for virtual tours where I could have one person, myself as a leader, and 5 people following within a room, talking about different images and showing them over time. So this is, for instance, myself in Nairobi. And one can start seeing here, I have a screen. There are some people with me. I'm showing them what it looks like. We could then start getting aspects of what this might mean for fire, urban fire within the community, which is something that is a big concern in Nairobi. And thinking about what might be occurring, we can start seeing the exposure, we can start thinking about the vulnerability of the people, and we can start discussing the potential hazard from the different buildings and biomass that we see around us. And we can start walking around different places with those arrows there. I can actually go to different places within this particular area. And this is me just walking along the street here and toggling along. This here is...
I'm just going to take a video if that's okay.
And I'm hoping the volume's not really coming out.
Shaky.
But this was with a couple of geological institutes we had together. We were talking about a region that is prone to landsliding and a past landslide that occurred. This here is in an app that was put together by National Geographic, and it's just an example that you can now create 3D imagery on the site of what it actually occurs like, but then you can superimpose photos on it, text on it, and people can wander around, they can take pictures, they can open up, and they can have videos showing more information as they are going along. We can integrate our own assets and upload them into Wander and Google Street View. So all of the people in my institute now have access to these cameras. They can bring with them in the field. They can take pictures, and we can then upload them and tell stories afterwards. And so this is an example. Ellen Robson is a postdoc at the Institute, and she and Sim Rennie, who is a co-director of the Institute, they put together a system here where they tied the camera to the car itself, and then they went along and did a transect. This is in Nepal here, And they did a transect along the road where there was no Google imagery. And this is an example of the image. You can see landslides on the left. And she did this both before and after the monsoon. So we now have a visual record of what occurred in that area between before the monsoon area and after the monsoon area. Now, what are some of the challenges here? Engagement, how do we ensure that the experience leads to meaningful actions? And accessibility, ensuring they're inclusive and usable for a broad audience, because there's some people that won't be able to access the headsets. The last item I'll talk about is artificial intelligence before I have one slide on uncertainty. And artificial intelligence in resilience planning, it can be used for forecast predictive modeling. It can help us anticipate hazards like floods, wildfires, heat waves, and aid in early forecasting warning systems. Decision support, and I'm careful here, I'm not saying decision making. The AI models can help assist in allocating resources and planning for long-term risks. A couple days ago, I did a Google search on AI and disasters and hazards and resilience, and there's a lot that is now coming up in the literature where it's clear that a lot of people are working in this area. So what's the role of AI in communications for resilience? Simplifying complex data. There's large volumes of data could be communicated to non-experts, and this allows for decision makers and communities to better understand risk and resilience strategies. This is an interesting YouTube video about using real-world big data analysis with AI specific to large amounts of weather data. And it can be customized for risk communication, so we can tailor the risk information to specific communities. And this can help ensure that communication is relevant and accessible to diverse audiences. So I tried something. I asked ChatGPT 4.0, I have a 1 in 1,000 chance, not change, of a magnitude 6 or greater earthquake occurring in a given region. I'd like you to tailor this information for different groups and needs with regard to resilience. Interestingly, ChatGPT understood I meant chance, and I've just noticed that now that I said change. And so it gave me examples of local government and urban planners, and it gave me different messages for each one. What would be the actionable recommendations and the focus? Now, of course, you have to go through this, you have to think about it, but it was a fascinating picture into saying, well, what are the different messages that I should be giving? What's the scenario analysis for clear informing of decisions? And so these can simulate various hazard scenarios, and it allows communicators to present possible outcomes in a clearer, more digestible way. And it can make these clearer strategies and easier to convey. So the left is a paper that was done on featuring simplification and flood susceptibility based on machine learning, which is one part of AI. And on the right is AI tools for flood assessment and modeling in Australia. Now, some of the challenges are balancing complexity and clarity without oversimplifying data, managing expectations, so we're not giving definitive solutions, trust and transparency, ensuring they're presented transparently, including the biases, and finally, something very particular to the hazard risk community, what do we do with small amounts of data? Many AI algorithms depend on large data, but in the hazard risk and resilience communities, our models are often very small amounts of data. So my last slide is going to be on communicating uncertainty and resilience building because of its importance. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just that uncertainty is a part of resilience planning. And it can be within the evidence we use the uncertainty. So the data has uncertainty, but the forecast outcomes also have uncertainty. With visualization, we can communicate uncertainty with a range of visualization methodologies, from error bars to color to words. And we need to think seriously about how do we convey our uncertainty. Framing the uncertainty within our communication creates for more adaptable and flexible resilience strategies. And we need to ensure that different groups understand the uncertainties without losing confidence in these resilience strategies. So I'm going to close there for questions and answers and comments. And I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you for your very informative presentation, Dr. Bruce. Indeed, these technologies are changing the way we communicate about resilience in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. Tools like visual aids, fun learning games, virtual or augmented reality, and AI are making it easier for everyone to understand big ideas. These tools help practitioners share their knowledge in a way that's clear and interesting, so communities can learn, get involved, and work together to be safer and stronger for the future. If you can remember, during the episode 5 of the Resilience Live, Dr. Aaron Opdyke presented a serious game focused on flood decision making in Leyte. This game effectively helps the local community understand difficult concepts relating to flood risk management and resilience. It provides participants with a hands-on experience, enabling them to explore various scenarios and make informed decisions. For those who want to learn about this serious game, you can go to the UPRI Facebook page or YouTube channel. All right, I'm sure our audience has learned a lot about the topic, but I'm also certain that many have their own thoughts and questions. So at this point, we will be opening the floor for any questions our attendees may have. Please use the Zoom reaction button to raise your hand and wait for the host, me, to call your name and unmute you before speaking. For those who would prefer it, we will also entertain entertain questions sent to the chat box. Those watching through Facebook Live or YouTube, you may also send your questions below. Now, the floor is officially open for the Q&A session. I think a participant is raising her hand. Ms. Richney Subihana, you can now unmute your mic.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Richney, I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, Doc Bruce. Thank you for an insightful presentation. This is actually not a question, but I just want to share that as a forester and a researcher in the Philippines, understanding and communicating resilience is critical, especially given the region's unique vulnerabilities to hazards like typhoons, floods, and landslides. So utilizing tools such as data visualization, um, virtual and augmented reality, and even serious games can play a vital role in conveying complex environmental risks to communities. So, in the forestry sector, these technologies can help illustrate the impacts of deforestation on flood risk, the role of forest cover in mitigating landslides, or how climate change may affect biodiversity in local ecosystems. So I think it's integrating these approaches into public education and local governance can foster a deeper community engagement with resilient strategies. So making scientific data actionable for forest protection and disaster mitigation efforts in the Philippine setting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insights regarding the topic, Ms. Richney Subiano. Dr. Bruce, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. I agree with the comment, and I think we can move on to other things. So thank you very much for that comment.
Okay, so our next question is coming from our chat box, and it's coming from Mr. Daniel Ratila. Serious games seems like a frontier in risk and resilience literacy. How you or your colleagues notice any difference in how players respond when games are deemed too easy or too difficult?
Yeah, thank you very much for that comment, Danielle. So serious games, when they are much, much too easy for a given stakeholder group, they don't take it at all seriously. If it's a medium sort of difficulty, they will take it seriously. If a game is too hard, I would say that the game has not been designed correctly. So I've never actually seen a game that's made too difficult where it's being actively used. And too difficult would mean it starts having mathematical equations and it starts having variables and it starts using jargon. I would just argue then that that's probably not been designed appropriately, the serious game. There are some really, as I mentioned, the 2008 review on serious games is out there. I think the key with the serious games is who is it aimed at, what group, and how are you measuring the efficacy of the serious game. Often people just go into the serious games, they make them without measuring their efficacy in appropriate manners, just because they're fun to do. Thank you.
All right. I hope your question, Mr. Daniel Ratila, has been answered. So let's now move on to the next question, and it's coming from our Q&A box. It's coming from a anonymous participant. Can you share any insights on developing culturally sensitive visualization for diverse communities?
Yeah, thank you for that question, whether or not we can share any insights on developing culturally sensitive visualizations for diverse communities. Yeah, let me just take a very obvious example. The color we use in visualizations. If I use the color red in some cultures, it will mean good luck. In other cultures, it will mean warning. And so just something as basic as a red, yellow, green, red meaning the most serious, yellow meaning semi-serious, and green meaning okay, in some cultures means exactly the opposite. So colors play a very key role. Also, the words we use and how we use them and bold become very important. I think that I won't go into more depth there, but it is important then if you're developing a visualization, not just for a specific country, but for a specific group of people, that you're clear and that you work with people from that community on those visualizations you are creating.
All right. So I think, Dr. Bruce, it is been tackled to that topic, that topic in our workshop last month regarding visualization. And our next question is coming from our chat box, and it's coming from Mr. Josh Bruce. Good afternoon. Most of learning tools mentioned earlier rely on audience being able-bodied. How can people with disabilities engage with these tools? And if not, are there other tools specifically designed for disabled people to help them understand concept of hazard and risk?
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's very important. So I have had in my classes students who could not hear. I've had students who were blind or partially sighted. And one of the things I worked on, because I do a lot of visualization, I use serious games, is I worked with them on ways that they would be able to access material. For visualization, we worked on ways of describing the visualizations, and now it is much easier than previous, where if you put a graphic or visualization into ChatGPT and ask it to describe it, it actually will do a very, very good job at doing that. We also worked with taking certain visualizations like correlations and creating a bas relief of them so that my blind student could, Michael, he could feel what it was. The serious games, you can create cards which have a texture to them. So you can start thinking about different ways that they might be accessible for hearing impaired or seeing impaired people for different scenarios. Many times we are not designing serious games for specific differences in people. And that's something we recognize in the serious games community. We recognize it in visualization. Virtual reality, I have met a number of people in virtual reality who could see, but they could not hear. And when I say I met them, we met with them where we were in shared rooms. And I knew that they were seeing, and we adopted some sort of a text mechanism where we could write to each other. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bruce, for that answer. And thank you to Mr. Josh Bruce for that interesting question. And our next question is coming from Miss Regine Joy Javier. I noticed you have mentioned using ChatGPT or AI in your presentation. What are your thoughts on transparency when using these tools to develop communication materials, particularly for audience like local governments or academics who have concerns or reservation about AI?
Thanks for that question, Regine Joy. I'm not sure how to answer this question right now. And the reason why I'm pausing is I'm thinking about tools such as Grammarly, Microsoft Word Check. We don't tell people that we're using Grammarly. We don't tell people that we're using basically what's an AI to fix our grammar. My concern, and I think your concern, is that what I showed you is generative AI. And in general, right now, we always acknowledge anything that is generative AI. We say this was done with the aid of this because we generated it, but we don't acknowledge that we use AI if it's helping our structure or our grammar or our word use. What I think will happen in the next 10 years is that AI will become so prevalent that we may stop worrying as much about generative AI. For the moment, myself, my colleagues, and you should always be acknowledging when we're using generative AI. I think where I'm pausing is how do we then say we've tailored the message for all of you, but we used an AI to help us. That doesn't sound very good, does it? So I think that's something that we're going to have to go back and think about. You know, if we use generative AI to help us with the scenario, how do we then tell the people to who we're aiming those messages that we use the generative AI without them losing trust in us? So it's an open question, that one.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Dr. Bruce, for that answer. And thank you for Ms. Regine Joy Javier for that question. And our next question is coming from the participant, Ms. Janiela Sandoval. You may now unmute yourself.
Thank you, Audrey. Hi, Dr. Bruce. It was a wonderful presentation. So, you discuss about VR and serious games. I've tried the Korean Red Cross virtual reality disaster resilience training, as well as Dr. Aaron of that serious game. I wonder if these innovations have already or the innovations you have already tried have already moved past theories, if the participants in these trainings have already used the knowledge that they gathered, that they gained from these trainings in actual disasters. Because so far, with the Korean Red Cross virtual disaster training, it's very basic. So I was wondering if the participants that have used this technology actually got or gained practical knowledge and use it in actual disasters.
Okay, so Janiela, thank you very much for that comment. I think this comes back to my point is how do we measure the success of whatever communications intervention that we're using? The only way to know that is to have some sort of a baseline before they used it. And therefore you would have to have done a baseline with that group. And there are many ways of doing baselines before they actually do the VR simulation. I'll give you an example. I took it was a cognitive virtual reality test that's being designed for the health service on spatial awareness. And they did a baseline with me, and they want to propose it to our health services. They then did it for me in 2 dimensions with a computer screen flat, and then they did it with me in virtual reality. And they actually had scores they were giving on how much I was gaining by using the virtual reality versus the screen itself. So you need to set up an actual experiment there to see whether you're gaining in terms of, in this case, the virtual reality, but also the serious game.
Thank you, Dr. Bruce.
Thank you, Dr. Bruce, for that answer. And thank you, Ms. Janiela Sandoval, for that question. So unfortunately, due to the limited time, we will not be able to entertain all of your questions. You may, however, send them to the UPRI Facebook page as messages. This will be forwarded to Dr. Bruce after this session. Before we officially end today's episode, we would like to request everyone to open your cameras for a quick photo off. Ms. Ney will be taking our photos, so everyone, please read your smiles.
Hi, everyone. So please hold your smiles for a moment. We have the panel. Okay, I'm waiting for other participants to open their camera. Okay, so first panel. Please hold your smile. Second panel. And we're down to the last one. Okay, thank you for your wonderful smile.
Okay, we shall now move on to the end of our webinar. Thank you once again to Dr. Bruce for sharing his time and knowledge with us this afternoon. As always, this webinar has been brought to you by the UP NOVA Center and UPRI in partnership with UNESCO IGCP. We would also like to thank our partners once again for this episode. You may react or raise your hand if you're present. The Lyceum of the Philippines Laguna Biology Society, the UP Los Baños Interdisciplinary Studies Center for Integrated Natural Resources and Environment Management, the Association of Filipino Forestry Students, UPLB, the UP Volcano Tectonics Laboratory, the Mapua Malayan Colleges Laguna, the UP Rockhounds, the Geological Organization of Partido State University, the Association of Geologists and Geological Engineers of Mapua, the Mindoro State University College of Arts and Sciences, Yaman, Philippines, the Center for Neighborhood Studies, Philippines, the Philippine Association of Geology Students, Society of Economic Geologists, Student Chapter, the Municipal Government of Rizal, Laguna, the Earth Island Institute, Asia Pacific, the United Architects of the Philippines, the Geological Society of the Philippines, the Association of Geodetic Engineering Students of Bulacan Agricultural State College, the Geodetic Engineers of the Philippines Incorporated, Bicol University Student Chapter, the Geodetic Engineers of the Philippines Incorporated, Naga College Foundation Student Chapter, the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and the Junior Academic Research Enthusiast Society of Bulacan State University. To our aforementioned partners who have not sent us their photos yet, we highly encourage you to do so, as these photos will be used to showcase your organization. For those who want to collaborate with us, you may reach us via the UP NOVA Facebook page, or you may email us at resilience.institute@up.edu.ph or info@noa.edu.ph. Resilience Live will be held every last Thursday of the month, so mark your calendars. The next session will be on November 28th. Please stay tuned to the UPRI Facebook page for announcement of our next speaker and featured topic. Before we officially close this afternoon's webinar, please be reminded that participants will be issued a certificate of attendance once they have answered the evaluation form. You may find the link to the form in the chat box below.
Wait.
Please kindly submit the form within 24 hours. After this period, the form will be closed and we won't be able to issue certificates for any submissions made afterward. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you once again, Dr. Bruce, at maraming salamat din sa ating mga participants. We hope to see you all at the next session of Resilience Live. Once again, my name is Audrey, and it's been a pleasure being your host today.
We will keep the Zoom meeting for 5 minutes to give time for answering the evaluation form. The webinar will close in 5, 4, 3,